Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer1745, and we are continuing our Hearts of Iron 4's Black Eyes playthrough, and we are pushing well, I think. I mean, I know we're falling back there, but we're pushing pretty well on the Eastern Front. I'm liking how this is playing. Okay, they are retreating out of there. We got all these divisions here. Okay, you cross the river. You guys cross the river. You guys support that attack. So that attack is happening from multiple provinces. No, it's 9 divisions actually fighting there, but we're going to try to push up along this railway to control that. Hopefully they will be able to hold, but that may not be. Okay, well, these guys here will control that, or support that attack. Also keep them out. They're going to attack across to counterattack to help defend there. These guys are pushing in there. Oh, to cover their falling back. Right, and good. There we go. Mind you, I don't think you have taken Denmark yet in order to ask for garrison manpower and diplomacy. Yeah, no, I don't have Denmark at all. My analysis, just me, my analysis is that Germany would have been better off to have Italy as a friendly, neutral country than have them actively in the war. With them not being in the war and them, owning Albania, but nothing more here, probably, or I think they are too big of a country for even the U.S. to decide to attack, even if they are openly trading across here, particularly maybe just in resources, whether it's food, whether it's oil being purchased. I mean, if they ever found their own, they did start to look for their own oil here, but they never found any in the time period. But if they were able to purchase oil from some other peoples in the world or other resources, openly trading with the Germans, but being otherwise neutral, this basically gets rid of the Mediterranean front in the war, in my opinion. Because I don't think even like I say, even once the U.S. is in the war, I don't think they're willing to go to war with Italy. I don't think they would, and Greece would be still a neutral country, so I don't think they're whether Bulgaria joins the war or not, who cares? But they probably wouldn't, because they wouldn't be getting this Greek territory or that Yugoslavian territory, so there probably wouldn't be enough incentive to join the war. And if you just left Yugoslavia alone, even though it's a weak, crippling country, I do not believe the Western Allies would have pushed through here. So this all becomes, if you still have Hungary and Romania in the Axis in the war, you just sit down here. This would keep this locked out here. So now with Vichy France, or unoccupied France, or however you want to say this, as opposed to free France, would the Allies have landed here if there was no North Africa or Middle East campaign? I don't know that they would have. I'm not saying they wouldn't have, because would be a lot of speculation that goes along with, is Vichy, what we'll call Vichy France, is that legitimately France that signed the peace treaty, is, because, and Vichy France, even up, because you still see Paris policemen, and sort of that then switch sides to, in the sort of the Battle of Paris. There was a little bit of fighting in 1944 for the Battle of Paris. Mostly it was the French rising up against the Germans. But and you see the police, most of the police do rise up against the Germans. And so a lot of this stuff going on up here is jointly administered by the French and the Germans together, with very much of the idea that, hey, if we just behave and once the war is over, we'll get most of this territory back. Obviously, they had already grabbed up this officially and might, I'm not way down here, but maybe up here and maybe down, along here, they might have grabbed extra territory and the final analysis. But Paris, most of the industrialized North, would have gone back to Germany, is everyone's perception. If Germany, sort of somehow ends the war with Britain. Now, once you get the American the torch landings and whatnot, then it becomes clear that Germany's going to be defeated. And so, because France is allowed about 100,000 man army, a lot of them are up here. They get disarmed once, Germany moves in and occupied. But a lot of their army is also, colonial army out there too. And other places around Madagascar and other places. And like mentioning Madagascar, after the fall of France, there's like a tank company of, I think it's R-35s, that gets sent out to Madagascar. So even, after the fall of France in 1940, sometime in 40-41, they're still sending out, armored units that are, because they fought the British. I mean, it was a half-hearted fight, but it was because the British do invade Madagascar and take it over. They're sort of worried that the Japanese took over Indochina. They're worried the Japanese might take over Vichy France or put listening posts and observation posts to, try to identify ships out here and secretly station, Japanese subs or U-boats or whatever it is. They're worried about that. So they do a naval invasion, and it is an opposed, there's years ago, just like a 3-page article detailing. You can call them battles, you can call them skirmishes. There were dead on both sides, but not high numbers of casualties. This wasn't a hard-fought campaign, but they had new, like R-35s or something. They weren't like old World War I FT-17s. They were new vehicles, and they had been sent out after the fall of France. So they're sending out to places like North Africa, to places like Syria, to places like Madagascar, small tank, like company strength tank units and things like that are still being sent around. Germany's still allowing them in armed forces. That does disappear once the torch landings happen, of course. And of course, most of the, brief fighting that Patton had to face down here. Oh, hey, Admiral Teague. How you doing? The main character running that, kneeling on the floor, his arms open and a slice of lemon appealing. Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I see the animation there. Cool. Thank you so much. Super sticker. Thank you. And thank you. Thank you again for inviting me for a Patton watch party. I was telling the chat about it earlier today, and it was very enjoyable. So everyone check out let me just do this thing here. Where do I have it? I have it over here. Yes, everyone, check out. There we go. Pace. Admiral Teague's channel. He does a lot on Star Trek. If you're interested in that thing. So yes, and yeah, that was a quite fun day to do that. France, World War II tanks are kind of garbage. Only good thing, early war tanks had lots of armor. Yes, true, Kronos, true. but the idea is that Germany was allowing France to have tanks, which is an interesting thing. Germany was not confiscating all of the tanks, because they do use lots and lots of confiscated German tanks and often repurpose them, turn them into tank destroyers or other things. But allowing them to still manufacture or with some of the reserves that they had and ship them out around places. So, that is an interesting dynamic to look at. So, but my contention is if there is no Mediterranean action, if Italy is neutral, would because it's basically an American invasion, would the Americans have invaded North Africa? Morocco, Algeria, Tunis, or something like that, if there is otherwise peace there. Now, they would need to do that functionally to invade Vichy, in my opinion, because I do not think you can effectively, you can't effectively sustain an operation coming from someplace like Britain, because they really can't store much supplies or base anything out of Gibraltar. You'd need the bases down here to then feed reinforcements and supplies to start a second front down here. So maybe if you're going to do a second front here, but probably, so they might do that. They might decide that they, to hell with it, we got to, go after France from the southern side. But even at most, that means that Germany would have to, if it got to the bad situation, Germany would only have to garrison the French Mediterranean coast, which you don't have to garrison Greece. You don't have to garrison, the islands out here. You don't have to garrison Italy like they had to, that Patton and others were fighting here and then later pushed up here. And do remember, the only reason I know this, and it should be more in the history books, on June 5th, Mark Clark takes Rome. Conquering Rome is a big thing in history, for a nation to do it. And now the battle for Rome happens out here at Anzio. It's fought here. It's not fought in the streets of Rome, really. The Germans, by that point, the Germans are evacuating to, I forget the name, the Gustav line or whatever, the next line behind it. But it's a conquest of Rome. So the Americans under Mark Clark do conquer Rome. So that's one of, contribute to America in history. But that happens the day before D-Day. And by the time that's getting ready to be reported in America or Britain or wherever else, the news of D-Day is breaking, and that's the big news. So it pushes it off the headlines, really. So Mark Clark was a mistake. I would say Mark Clark is probably a good logistics general, that kind of thing like that, because he was worried about his logistics. He was worrying about his supplies. He was not a bold advancing general. So, if you push it like that, so to show, how again, context for me is everything. One of the reasons the Americans are able to get the foothold in here, I mean, there's multiple reasons. One of the reasons the Americans are able to get and make a foothold up here is because Germany is pouring in resources to hold the Americans down here. But before, and they don't show this, and I've read his book, Singer von Etterlin, really long name. He was commanding the German forces that were garrisoning Sardinia and Corsica. And I have come in time to really admire retreating generals who do it well. And this is partially coming from a quote or attributed to Frederick the Great. he really, and he obviously never met him, and he was only reading reports, but he really admired General Washington of the American Revolution, famed General Washington. And particularly in one of the cases he was looking at was Washington's withdrawal out of Manhattan, Long Island, and whatnot, in the face of overwhelming British ground forces and overwhelming British naval forces, which are controlling the waterways around here to a significant extent. But he is able to withdraw his forces intact in the face of the enemy. I don't think there was any real fighting. I mean, there may have been a few muskets popping off and maybe a couple of guys falling from it. But Washington's ability to withdraw his forces and not have them turned into a Fräulein von Singer und Etterlin. Yes, exactly. Plastic Gangsta. And I can see, yes, you can see your house from here. And so, and that made me think that it's one thing to be victorious and to pursue your enemy like Patton was. I know I'm falling back to it, but still thinking about the other day. And really pushing hard that Patton could do versus, say, Montgomery, and there's a lot of good reasons for Montgomery to behave. We never really even got in when we're talking about it. When he was methodically moving up here, along here, and basically Montgomery, because the first battle of El Alamein is the sort of Rommel attempt to break through. Montgomery holds that. The second battle of El Alamein happens just literally at the moment that stops, in which the British counterattack and push and crush. Hey, tiny USA ball, how you doing? You can kind of see Spain from there. Well, yeah, we can see Spain. So, and Montgomery has even, gone so far as to set up troops that are going to go and clear paths through his own minefields and mark them out so his own forces can rapidly go through his own minefields, meaning that they had to clear the minefields because they, wanted to stop, they were well put to stop the Germans. But, he was planning that, okay, well, once the German, offensive breaks, we need to then, before they can catch their breath, we need to go on our own offensive. So we need troops trained, with metal detectors and probes and whatever to clear the mines, because you don't want them blowing up clearing them. You want to do it quietly and get them cleared, and then put have the ribbons to put on the sides of the cleared area so tanks and men know what sections are cleared. He has all of this prepared and trained, set up, so he immediately counterattacks. I'm sort of glossing over things here, but but set up to immediately counterattack. And so he overruns a lot of the Italian forces because they're non-motorized. So and some of the German forces are non-motorized. And so all the non-motorized forces he's overrunning. But there has been a history of British forces one time getting somewhere in here. I don't quite know how far, but several other times back and forth around here, that the British forces outrun their own supply lines, and whether it's the Italians at first and then later the Germans are able to give them from bloody noses to even worse and drive them back. He knows that his supply lines cannot run from Alexandria to Tripoli. That's just too long. Montgomery knows this. Now, could he have keep a light pursuit force to gobble up a few more units, few of the units that were, stationed back in Tobruk at the time that El Alamein happened, and start walking back? Yes, he could have. But he sees that you can't run the supply line, so you have to set up, naval supply at Sidi Barrani, at Tobruk, at Benghazi, and whatnot, as you're moving along. And so he knows all of this stuff. So, and it's also, again, to analyze Montgomery here, Montgomery is a British general who understands what's going on with, and we'll use the term the British Empire. I know places like Australia and Canada are basically independent, part of the Commonwealth, but functionally independent. But he loses most of the Commonwealth support by 1942. And I'll explain what I mean here. In 1941, and you'll see in some of the movies that are really good, like the Desert Rats, a lot of the forces here are Commonwealth that are fighting in North Africa. They're from Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, India. He loses those. Now, those forces are still there. But what he loses is more forces, because there's even like a new, fresh, I forget which British division gets sent down to Singapore and basically surrenders in Singapore and not even part of the fighting up here. So even British forces are sent out here because at the end of 1941, December 7th, we all know, Japan attacks Britain and America and the Dutch. Well, New Zealand, Australian forces, they've got it. Their now priority is to defend Australia and New Zealand, and so they're now having to fight here. India has the largest all-volunteer army during World War II, and there is not just the Indian Army that's part of the British colonial system. India does not look like this. India is a patchwork of different countries, shall we say. There are for the British administration, there's 3 administration zones, one up here, one down here, and one sort of out here. But there are a patchwork of Rajas and other sort of princely states, and some of them, many of them have armies. Now, whether they're large or small or just sort of semi-militarized police forces or whatever, but Britain needs to have, and then of course there's, bandits, and, we can see, still in Northwest Pakistan, there's still, hill tribesmen that are fully armed to this day. So there's, bandit occupation, there's anti-independent occupation, there's just simply peacekeeping. This is a huge place with huge numbers of population. You need a military police keeping forces to keep riots from happening or whatever. So you have, whether it's English or Scottish forces needing to occupy here, plus your locally raised forces and whatnot. You have all that needing to happen here, but you now have the Japanese on the Burma, border here. So he's in essence, they're getting trickles of manpower from India, and when Iraq revolts against, because they even revolt against their own king, but revolts against sort of British oversight. And it's a semi-independent state, but they revolt and go to the Iraq. It is actually the command elements from British India that they get the forces to come and put that down, not drawing them away from the forces that are on the front. So that's sort of the Indian Army moving in and fighting the Iraqis. So Montgomery knows this, and so Montgomery can't just charge out there with a division and it gets captured, no problem. No, he can't. They know they're, like we were talking, our manpower problems here. They have manpower problems. So Montgomery needs to move up, needs to push. He knows that the main failure, and there's multiple failures in different elements of his previous commanders, but he knows that the main failure is outrunning the supplies and having your forces strung out instead of concentrated. And the reputation, and he fights really hard because Rommel becomes the boogeyman to the Commonwealth, the British forces here. So he wants to fight that reputation. So he does not want to have one single reverse, to have one single panic of people running away or whatever. So again, you can tell I do have a certain admiration for Montgomery. So Montgomery, yes, he's a plotting general, but he's really built up the supply and his forces to deal with multiple elements, and fighting the Battle of El Alamein. He fights it, and basically he just sort of follows, if you will, the Germans to here. And France had a reasonably strong fortified line along here, which the Germans occupy, because the Germans had not occupied Tunisia prior to the Allied landings. I say it's Allied because it's also British landings over here. They only start occupying it, the Italians and the Germans occupying it after those landings, and this is going to give them the shortest supply route to supply. And they create, sort of overstating it, but sort of fortress Tunisia. And that's sort of where we pick up the Rommel movie. But, would they, like I say, would they have landed had there not been a war being fought down here in the Mediterranean. Maybe, maybe not, but I don't think they would have gone after a neutral, because they didn't go after a neutral Spain, which was known to be sending arms, known to be sending critical resources into Germany. They did not stop Spanish ships on the high seas. They did not do anything like that. So I don't think they would have with Italy. So at worst, you would have that much more garrison for Germany to defend the coastline. At best, they wouldn't even have to do that. And if you didn't have, like I was saying earlier, if you didn't have Germany having to, once Italy pieces out, trying to need to occupy Rhodes, Crete, mainland Greece, worry about fighting all of the partisans in Yugoslavia, defending the French coast here. Now, with Singer von Etterlin, like I say, is once it becomes very apparent that this is where the main Allied landings are happening, he gets the orders, and he masterfully, without a single loss of life, without a loss of any equipment, he gets all of the German forces. They withdraw because they don't really garrison Corsica. They know if it's going to happen, it's going to be landing in Sardinia. He withdraws out of Sardinia, across the water here, get up to here, and crosses back to the Italian mainland with all of his German forces intact, all of their equipment, all their supplies. So he withdraws them and realized, well, no one was landing. Yeah, no ground forces were landing, but you got to realize the British and the American navies and submarines are occupying here. There's British and American air power is hitting the various points around the the Mediterranean. So this is in the face of the enemy. Now, it isn't, again, in the face of ground opposition, but he does it, and he does it rather masterfully for a very little known general, but does it quite well. And I admire him for being able to carry off that maneuver. And so I think it's like 2 or 3 divisions. It's not a huge force, but that's 2 or 3 divisions that couldn't be thrown against the D-Day landings. This is, all the rest of Smiling Albert's, Albert Kesselring's fight in Italy could not be thrown against the Allies. So had all of these German forces that were in Italy, the Hermann Goering division, which was sort of a supersized division, very well equipped, other divisions, other armored divisions, other infantry divisions, and then whatever that was occupying down in Greece, if that could have all been thrown against the D-Day landings, I don't know that the Americans, even with their overwhelming air power, even with their naval gunfire of 16-inch naval guns blasting away from the sea, which are damned effective, even with all of that, I don't know that the Americans, even with their mobile harbors, could successfully land, get a bridgehead, and push out. They could with that, and obviously so many troops that are, fighting away on the Eastern Front, and troops that are garrisoning, and this gets back to where we start. There was at least one panzer division sitting up in Norway at the time of D-Day. Now, it was a panzer division that mostly had Panzer IIIs, some Panzer IVs. It was a panzer division, yes, but sort of an out-of-date panzer division. And it was sort of broken up into small bits to, control things here. But if Germany didn't have to control here, have troops here, that would be that much more. And even though the Americans, production-wise and whatnot, could overwhelm the Germans, but can they overwhelm them at a concentrated point? I think Germany can produce enough artillery shells, machine gun rounds, enough of the artillery pieces, and enough of the manpower to deal with a concentrated landing. It's the dispersal that allows D-Day to happen as much as anything else. We also talk about the bombing behind the railway systems, and we can talk about there's a bunch of other elements that go into allow this to happen. Including Garbo, the spy we talked about the other day, sending information out saying that it's going to happen at Calais. And I mean, there's a lot of other factors going on. It's not just a factor, but each factor adds up and is part of the puzzle. So yeah, I would think, looking back at it, that if they could have kept, even with the interruption to the high grade steel coming out of Sweden during the winter, and the winter is long up here because it can come during the summer, and it's up here, it's being made year round. It's just the railway or whatever connections down here and or the port itself ices over in the winter here, because this is much colder here than here, because this does get sort of Gulf Stream warming to the water here and whatnot. That doesn't happen here. So they're able to ship it out during the long winter, and winter meaning more than like 6 months. This is unusable. But had they put up with the Swedish ore coming out then and allowed the rest, it might have been better for Germany ultimately. And okay, let's see. So Indians, Australians, New Zealanders, South Africans, absolutely. The presidencies are exactly past the gangster, Madras, Bengal, and Bombay, although by World War II, as the vice-regal administration over all the three. Yes, yes, as plastic gangsters. And hello, Ken Tool 01, how you doing? Doing well here. Yes, they start out as sort of independent elements under the British East India Company, and yes, by World War I, they're under the vice-regal administration overall. But to my knowledge, they're never the same, in the sense that they have different administration styles as legacy styles, and yes, they're maybe being more integrated, more, made more the same than they were before, but they're still sort of directing out from the earlier East India Company period, and it's the Indian Mutiny that brings in the British overall government. So, Singer von Letten was one of the driving forces behind modern Bundeswehr. Yes, one of the guys who wrote the Himmelrod paper, or whatever it was called, that convinced us to rearm Germany as a NATO ally. Yes, I do. Like I say, I do have an I'm not a big. I read his book. It's been more than 20 years since I've read his book. I have it over my shelf, but I do sort of admire him as and to the best of my knowledge. I mean, he went along with the National Socialists, but he wasn't some evil guy from all of his occupation and other things. Have you researched winter equipment yet? Well, again, I'll have to check, but there's been a lot to research, and I don't know that I have. I'm trying to, where is, oh, nope, not yet. But, I did, let's zoom in here, mentioning that topic here again. I'm saying I don't think I've had enough time. I did prepare for a long winter war, which reduced my stability even more and lowered my war support. But I did do that, so that will reduce some of the winter attrition elements I see here. So we did go with that. All three developed from trading posts. Yes, whatever they're called. Yeah, they sort of call them factories. They weren't manufacturing factories, but yeah, they took the style of government from the local principalities. Absolutely. Yeah. And my friend Singh, who is here, may or may not agree with me, but I do believe Britain's governorship of India was a net, an overall positive. Because India, whether it's the Mughals, which are, the corruption of the word Mongols, and other various occupations coming in from the north, India is a mixture of local influences and external, not just European, as I'm saying, with the Mongols, occupation that has gelled, and India is a diverse and something that is not well known in the West, at least in the United States, but is a very interesting place. And I do believe Britain was ultimately, I understand why they want to be independent. I'm not saying they shouldn't want that, but I do think Britain was ultimately good. I mean, there were bad things, I'm sure. I know so. But I think ultimately on balance, Britain was good for India. I think it gave them that taste of Westernism that has helped India a lot. I have the book behind, or what's it called? Yeah, neither hope nor fear um, is what I believe it's called, or at least my version is called. It may be translated um, differently, but yes. So yeah, I'm again, I'm not good at memorizing things or whatever to quote things, but and it's been a long time since I read it, but yeah, I think it was another little vignette was, and he's a German general, and one of the things he's through his campaign is he has a bathtub. Now the bathtub isn't like a bathtub you're probably thinking of. The bathtub is basically like a field cot, that sort of legs that you set up and you sleep on, but it's a tub, it's a canvas tub. And so and he uses this throughout his campaign. However hot the water is, on a fire or something, you pour it in and you get in and take a bath. So he's had this through his campaigning career, at least as a general, for some time. And after he's taken prisoner, he still has it in his other luggage. But I forget where it was, but he and a bunch of other, at least generals, but maybe colonels and somewhat are brought somewhere on a train. This is after the war is just ended. He's a prisoner, but it wasn't very much of being a prisoner, if you will. They're on a train to get to somewhere, and they get taken off the train. And and they go, oh well, you got to go like 5 miles or something down the road to whatever place. And he's looking at his, his suitcase and his sort of extra sort of suitcase supply thing with his bathtub, and realize, I can't drag all this stuff all that way. It's too much stuff. There's no truck to throw it into. There's no, other supply. So what he does, instead of going on and marching to the camp, he just right there pops open the bathtub, at the train station. I guess there's a water faucet, and takes a cold water, fills it up with cold water, and takes a cold water bath, and gets himself clean just out there in the open. I don't know if he's wearing shorts or not. And just uses it for one last time. He gets dressed and picks up just one piece of luggage and marches off to the next officer's prisoner of war camp thing. And I don't know where it was. I don't know if it was in Italy or in Germany or where it was at the time. But yeah, it was an interesting little funny thing I remember reading about him at his and elements of his prisoner of war experience. Huge positive. India was chaotic. Well, I don't know if it was a hellhole, but compared to world standards, I mean, it wasn't Europe, but Europe was also fighting. What was that concept of Well, a national concept didn't really exist. You're absolutely right. Various ethnicities. Well, and even to this day, the concept, it broke up between Pakistan and now Bangladesh and India, the remaining name. But yeah, they didn't even stay together. Even Pakistan, East Pakistan or West Pakistan and East Pakistan didn't even stay together. So yeah, it broke up. Maybe not into all the little tiny states that it could have, but it did. Yeah, I have it now. It was neither hope or neither fear nor hope. Okay. But I haven't read it yet. I must have had it 10 years or more. Yeah, it's a good little book. If you're wanting to read about it, it's good. I'm not saying it's great or anything, but it's good. So yeah. Yes, Germany controlling Norway does give them abilities to, push up on this front, but they never take Murmansk. Finland right now is in its own private war, and it's actually embargoing us and not allying with us and fighting the Soviets. So, but even if Finland stays neutral, yeah, allies aren't always a positive gain for you. As I'm saying here. Okay, so let's look down here. They're moving, pushing on him. These Romanians are coming here, but we got one guy retreating. We got a couple of divisions there. So let's start our push here as well. So that will pin these forces so they won't concentrate too much. We're getting these guys across the river to attack up from the south here instead of trying to fight our way across the river. Okay. We may remove our attaché, but I'm not going to do it under protest here. Okay, these guys are running to there, so we're going to push to here. Yes, yes, it's easy. You got Kherson spelled with a C instead of a K there, and you got where's Kharkov? Kharkov is way out here. You got Kiev back here. Yeah, last night I was spent a few hours talking with somebody in Ukraine, and not just about the war, but yeah. And you could research logistics or radio support company. They would give lots of new division, or you could unlock lots of new divisions to make upgrade old ones. Yeah. Okay. We will. Okay. So logistics would be okay. We got logistics company 2. And we don't yet have signals company 2. We have signals company 1. So we could do that. Yeah, eventually we'll get to 42, which won't be terribly long. Yes. Yeah, well, yeah. I'm refusing to call this Kiev because it's Kiev to me, and it's been Kiev, and it may be more Russian influence. I get that, but it's the name I know the city as. Okay, you're going to support that attack, but we don't want you leaving the locality. I guess I'm a person that wants to buck fashion and do my own thing or whatever. So we're going to attack there, and one of the divisions here is going to support that attack. Okay, so these guys are coming up here. We're going to push to here because that's going to complement that. And okay, these two divisions are going to go there. These guys are going to go here. And these guys are going to go here. These two divisions are going to go here. They're coming up there. They're retreating there. Good. Okay. Well, they look like they're in fairly good shape. So we're going to push there. I think these guys are just going to go north. We got the other ones moving that way. These guys can move that way and that way. Okay, so now we are pushing here. Let's support that attack. I can just go to gobble up the railway there. You know, they're not connected yet, really. Well, yeah, not really. Okay, that fight was won there. They're sort of counterattack. They're occupying there, and they are occupying there. So you attack across the river, and you support that attack just to keep them from reorganizing themselves. All the Indian princes were constantly fighting against each other. Oh, of course, yeah. Only justice they had access to was their Lord Raja. Yeah, well, see, this is one thing that yeah, that Britain really grants to the world the sense of justice and the sense of a justice system. And God, it's imperfect everywhere I can see it. So, you know, whether in Britain or in the United States or you know, other parts of the world, but it's definitely the idea of a justice system that Britain does give to the world. Yeah, well, our manpower here is, you know, not doing great. That is why, and I cheated in instead of waiting for things like this to happen, which would then allow me to, it may have happened a little while ago, but allow me to do a military parade in Paris that will give me 78 political power in 30 days. And so doing it without the sort of cheating was going to take a while. Yes, the settee, the thuggy. And I would say a lot of, you know, at least prior to British rule, there was an educated class, but what really happens is a Western educated class starts showing up as opposed to a more religious educated class that was there before Britain shows up. And just because something is part of the culture doesn't always mean it's good, doesn't mean it's bad. It's just the thing. Okay, these guys are now pushing up through here. Let's add in them. Okay. Well, you know, I know we haven't played very much, but we're going to end this episode here. And I want to thank Tim, Strongarm, Niagara, Timothy, Sir Toyjet, Garrett, Marcus, Folk, and the great Hoffmanator for support over on Patreon. But everyone out here, can you just make sure you give the video a good thumbs up? And if you're new around, oh, and you can also post a comment. Just say hi is cool. You don't have to say anything much if you don't want to, but say hi would be cool. And of course, if you're new around here, please subscribe to the channel. See you next time for more, yes, even more Hearts of Iron.